Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets, or of course, you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. Let's talk about Anthony Yarde getting Lyndon Arthur out of there in the rematch in 4 rounds. He has his revenge. It was a very exciting start to the fight, wasn't it? Anthony Yarde came racing out of the blocks. No interest in pacing himself at all. In the preview, we spoke about the fact that if he can increase the tempo and really get Lyndon Arthur on the back foot, he could really cause Lyndon Arthur a problem in terms of taking away his jab, because one of the things Lyndon Arthur likes to do is put his weight onto that front foot and launch the jab from that position. So if you're forcing him onto his back foot, he's not really in a typical situation where he can whip out the jab the way he likes to do. So I did like that from Yarde, but I felt, just like I said in the preview video, he had to be smart with how he comes in with the flurries. Throw 2 around, right? In other words, you want to win the round quite clearly, but use a lot of feints. Don't just come rushing across trying to get him out of there, because if you do, it's a gamble. It could work for you and you could get him out early, but if you don't, it could cause a real problem. Well, Anthony Yarde decided he was going to lay it all on the line, and I did tweet to say, listen, if he's going down this route, he's putting way too much in the first round, in my opinion. If he's going down this route, he better make sure he gets him seriously hurt in the first 5, because if it goes beyond that, how much effort has this man with these big muscles and the low body fat percentage, how much is he going to be able to continue this without building up with lactic acid, right? It's just, he's going pedal to the metal, so to speak. He's got to be careful about doing that. He better make sure he gets him out of there early. It's essentially a risk. And as a result of that, what we saw is that Lyndon Arthur began to wrestle with Anthony Yarde, which further increases the load on those muscles. So everything's designed essentially to wear Yarde down, and I'm sitting and I'm thinking, I will not be surprised if Anthony Yarde gets taken out late here. He's either got to get him early, he's got to get him in the first 5 rounds, like I've said, or things are going to get very difficult for him down the stretch. Well, he did get him down early. He did get him out early. And I guess we'll never know now, right? We'll never know. How would it have gone if it had gone to 8, 9? And, there have been other fights like this in the past when Derek Chisora fought David Haye. David Haye was blowing hard when that knockout came. If that had gone another 2, 3 rounds, who knows how that would have gone. Now, that wasn't the same as this sort of fight. Obviously, Chisora was trying to wear Haye down in a different way. He was the one moving forward. Whereas Lyndon Arthur was trying to weather the storm. Completely different approaches. But I'm just trying to say, sometimes these explosive athletes, if you can get them into the latter half, a lot of the times they're not going to be able to maintain that driving in 6th or 7th gear, right? They're going to have to lower the gear, and that's when you can start to go to work, and they could end up running out of fuel and being left on the hard shoulder in the motorway, right? So there are still question marks about Anthony Yarde. Is he going to be able to fight like this? Because David Haye spoke about it being sustainable. I'm not sure that was sustainable, to be honest with you. I don't think he could fight like that for 12 rounds. So is he going to be able to pick his spots at the highest level against the likes of Joe Smith Jr., against Beterbiev, against Bivol, and still come through the other side? I have no doubt in my mind that Anthony Yarde has the athleticism to be able to, when he lets it all out, when he explodes on a guy, to be able to get anyone out of there in the light heavyweight division. He very nearly got Sergey Kovalev out of there. If he had got Sergey Kovalev out of there, if he had approached the first Lyndon Arthur fight in the way he approached this fight, you could be talking about a guy who's undefeated and everybody's talking about him knocking everybody out, right? So the potential is there, but you also know that, he does some fantastic stuff. There was a lot of variation with the shots, but he's not an elite level boxer. This is a guy who's a great fighter. There was one really good thing he did, although I agreed with Lyndon Arthur's attempts to wrestle with Anthony Yarde and try and take him into deep waters, wear him down in that manner. It became a little bit too consistent and a little bit too predictable, although I did like the concept that Pat Barrett had come up with. And I mean, there were moments, for instance, where they were sort of at outer mid-range and they were up against each other. Instead of pumping the jab, Lyndon Arthur was sort of putting his forearms out, trying to sort of push back and then fall in and grab. It became a little bit too predictable. You should only really do that. Keep walking backwards. Only really do that by making him miss that first phase of attack as he launches himself in. Then try and tie him up. Don't try and instigate the clinch when he's on the outside and you're on the outside. You want him to overreach and then catch him on the way in with a solid shot, then fall into him and grab him. Stop him from working on the inside while you're winning the fight on the outside. It's easier said than done when Anthony Yarde's coming at you at such a frenetic tempo, right? But we're just talking about the intricacies here that might have played a big role in this. Well, one of the things that Anthony Yarde did that I really like to counter that, something that I've spoken about on many occasions, something that I generally really like, is the head control with the forearm. I think it's such an important part of boxing, fighting in general. head control, because you are breaking your opponent's construct or affecting his balance, particularly on the inside. Even when you're up against a guy who might be physically stronger than you, you're putting him in a position where he cannot use his physical strength. And Anthony Yarde was able to put that forearm across the face of Lyndon Arthur when he was trying to come inside, just across the face, push back at it to create that distance between his right hand and the head, and then he chopped down with that right hand. And he did that twice and landed flush twice, and they were solid shots. So he was starting to read the attempts to clinch him and still able to maintain that range, using that space rather, not range, they're on the inside, but maintain that space by controlling the head and then chopping down with the right hand. So it was a very, very good performance from Anthony Yarde, a risky performance. It did pay off. He did put all the chips down and it paid off early. Let me know what you think about the highest level though. Against Beterbiev, I find it interesting because we have seen Beterbiev dropped and hurt in the past. And Anthony Yarde, if he lets go of his hands and really goes in there and decides, I'm going to approach it the way I've approached this fight today, he has a real chance against Beterbiev. Because Beterbiev, like I said, I know this is not going to be a popular thing to say. A lot of people like to mythologize fighters. Everybody knows about the short power of Beterbiev. Everybody knows about his ability to pick shots. He's offensively fantastic. But this is why Anthony Yarde shouldn't get into a boxing match with him. Go and have a street fight. Callum Johnson had him on the floor. Yes, he got up and then stopped Callum Johnson. But if Anthony Yarde can take that as a blueprint and really go after Beterbiev, you never know what could happen. The most likely outcome is, in my opinion, Beterbiev would get to Anthony Yarde. At this stage, Anthony Yarde still has some developing. Beterbiev, there's a lot more to his game. Holistically, I believe Beterbiev would win by knockout. But I wouldn't rule out Anthony Yarde in the first 4 rounds. Right? If he approaches it like this, he's got a chance. With Bivol, I don't think he should approach it like this. With Bivol, I do think he would have to pick spots, because Bivol, I don't think, is quite as vulnerable as Beterbiev, and although he's not offensively as destructive, he's a great boxer. So if he was able to weather the storm, you could end up seeing him really start to outbox Anthony Yarde. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. I know Joe Smith's the next guy that he's supposedly due to fight. Joe Smith, of course, is fighting Callum Johnson. Let's say, for argument's sake, Yarde comes up against Smith. That's an interesting one because Joe Smith's a tough dude and a good fighter and very physically strong. I wouldn't be surprised if he's more physically strong in the clinch than Anthony Yarde. We even saw Lyndon Arthur at one point push Anthony Yarde back onto the ropes today. So, Anthony Yarde's a very explosive fighter, but in a wrestling sort of scenario, I can imagine Joe Smith being the stronger man. He's also heavy-handed. They both are. He's not as explosive as Anthony Yarde, though, but he's durable. So it'll be interesting to see how those styles mesh. Really interesting fights ahead. Let me know what you think. In terms of Lyndon Arthur, where do you want to see him go from here? Listen, he's still one of the best light heavyweights in the country, and because there's so much depth in this country, that puts him up among the best in the world. He's definitely a top 10 or top 15 light heavyweight. There's no doubt about that. So there's a lot of good fights out there to be made. Would you want to see him in domestic clashes? Would you want to see him with some sort of fight against Craig Spider Richards, for instance? Maybe Joshua Buatsi? Where do you want to see Lyndon Arthur go from here? Or do you just want to see him take another stepping stone type fight now and start to rebuild again to try and get back to the top rather than getting there with a big name straight away? What do you think about that? Talking about the rest of the undercard really briefly, I thought Hamza Shiraz was very, very fortunate tonight. From a tactical perspective, I thought he got it all wrong. He was looking, and I was tweeting about this throughout, right? He was looking, in my opinion, to land something clean with the first shot he was throwing. So if it was a jab, he was looking to really step into that jab. And Bradley Skeete has developed some fantastic movement under the guidance of Dominic Ingle. He would literally just drop the shoulder and pivot out. It became quite predictable, but he didn't have to do anything too unpredictable because it was working so well. And one of the problems that Sheeraz had, in my opinion, was that searching for that first shot to land flush, and he's coming behind a high guard and he's plodding his way forward. He was being made to think the movement of Bradley was giving him problems. Bradley was getting quite low sometimes and shooting a jab through that high guard, something we spoke about the other day, as well as a potential for Anthony Yarde to exploit with Lyndon Arthur. So he was finding these gaps in the guard. And Sheeraz just seemed to run out of ideas. He wasn't letting his hands go. I can't say he looked like he would have been afraid of what was coming back at him. He was just overthinking things. He couldn't get things done. And what I basically said needed to happen on Twitter is that he needs to try and forget that first shot. Forget trying to land that first shot. Ignore it, right? Forget it. Just don't try and be too accurate with it. Use it as a throwaway jab, right? Throw the jab knowing that Bradley Skeete is going to slip to either side because that's what he keeps doing. Once he slips, so you're drawing a movement, a reaction. Once he slips, you need to follow up that throwaway jab with 2 shots to the body, preferably wide rather than straight. Because that way, if he's trying to come off of that corner, you're going to be able to catch him as he's coming out. So what you're doing is trying to draw a reaction. With a throwaway jab or a feint or whatever, draw the reaction, get him to move, throw 2 wider shots to the body. Once you start putting him in a position where you're pinning him and you're letting your hands go and you're actually landing on anything, arms, body, then you can start to freeze him up. And once you start to freeze him up, you can go to the head. And we know that Bradley Skeete has seen better years. He's not the most durable of fighters of late, right? I think now he's been stopped by 3 of the last 5 opponents he's had. So you know that you can get to him if you go down that approach. Well, in one of the rounds, I think it was the round before he dropped Skeete the first time with that punch, the punch when he was on the floor, you did see with 22 seconds of the round remaining, he dropped a little shoulder feint. He didn't throw a throwaway jab, it was a shoulder feint. Then he threw Skeete reacted and then he threw 2 wide shots and they landed. He didn't win that round. But that one little thing showed you, look, what I've been saying on Twitter is what you should be doing. Start doing that. Well, he did manage to draw Bradley Skeete into a firefight in the following round. We'll get to that controversy in a moment. But a lot of it was by throwing hooks lower. So he was targeting, with more than one punch, he was targeting Bradley Skeete with lower shots, hooking wide shots. And that is what essentially got him the win, if you're talking about from a tactical perspective. So that was good. What he did, however, was very immoral to be able to get to that point. Bradley Skeete was sort of forced down. He wasn't knocked down. And while he was down, Shiraz landed 2 solid punches to the head, which were illegal blows. Now, he could have been disqualified here. The referee gave him the benefit of the doubt, took off a point. Bradley Skeete did seem to be okay in terms of, he took his time, he got up, he went for a walk, came back. He seemed to be lucid. I don't buy into the idea that he didn't recover. Now, that's not to say he shouldn't have been disqualified, Hamza Shiraz, right? I'm not making an excuse for him. I'm not saying, no, it's a legitimate win. Quite frankly, I thought Hamza Shiraz was poor, especially tactically. But I don't necessarily think that Skeete didn't recover from the first knockdown and that's why he lost. In my humble opinion, the reason that Skeete lost is because he caused himself an issue. When Sheeraz did close the range, he decided he was going to start holding his feet and start to hook with Sheeraz. Why? Get yourself as small as possible, pivot out and run around the ring. Get on the back foot. You are so far wide. All you've got to do is survive those last 2 rounds. You've won the fight. Instead, he wanted to hold his feet and trade with a natural light middleweight who's massive for the weight, who's very tall, at least for the weight, and you are a former welterweight that maybe even can beat that light welterweight. I can't remember. Certainly in the amateurs, I think he fought at light welterweight. This is a guy who, while he's tall, he's not a big guy, Bradley Skeete. He's been stopped on numerous occasions. Why is he trying to engage in a flat-footed hooking war with Hamza Shiraz? Now, maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you thought that he just hadn't recovered and as a result, he couldn't move around the ring anymore. I personally don't think that's the case, but that doesn't mean that Shiraz wasn't a very lucky boy and he could have got disqualified on another day. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents, in terms of the other fights. Listen, I didn't see the Sokolovsky fight fully. I did see the last couple of rounds. All I'll say is that in that sort of scenario, when you've got a guy like George Fox in there, I don't know how the fight went early. I don't know if George Fox just got really tired. But in those last 3 rounds, the ones that I saw, when you are that heavy and slow, trying to be fluid with upper body movement and pull counters and pulling out the way of shots, it doesn't suit you. It's this thing sometimes that happens whereby you see a lot of young fighters, they all want to fight like Floyd, get behind the shoulder. That's not how you should judge what style of fighting you should take on as a fighter, how you should approach a fighter. You have to look at your own physical attributes. This guy looked far too slow to be able to box like that. Have a higher guard. There's no problem with having a high guard, taking shots off the forearms and then trying to counter like that. Against a wily veteran like Sokolovsky, who is slow but very, very physically strong, you don't want to be in a position where you're giving him openings, right? Where you're giving him ways to figure out the spacing, to sort of figure out where your gaps are. He's an experienced, wily old cat. So when you haven't got the reflexes, I don't think you should be boxing like that. With regards to Dennis McCann, listen, the skills are very, very clearly there. He's got a lot of movement, Dennis McCann, a lot of understanding of distance. I don't think he's got his man strength yet. You know, he's 20 years old, and you could see, yes, this other guy was short and compact, but there wasn't much to him at all, and you could see that he was actually struggling to hurt him. He did say he broke his knuckle. Who knows? That might be the case, you know, and if so, it would explain why, if he broke his knuckle in the second round, why he couldn't really put his hands together to get a stoppage. But nonetheless, the skills are there, and I can't judge him too harshly too early because he is so young. He's a decorated amateur, 9-time national amateur champion. He's going to develop the physicality. So at the moment, it's just about biding time, continuing to work on his skills. He definitely has those skills. Perhaps look to work on certain things that he might not be great at. Get in the gym and look to work openings and look to break a guy down when you're the one who has to lead off. Because a lot of times he was working him up to the ropes, and he'd be then stepping back looking to still counter the guy where the guy's on the ropes. Well, if the man is not really necessarily looking to hurt you off the ropes, you're the one who has to create those openings. And when he was trying to do that, at times he was getting a little bit too excited, a little bit too keen to find those big shots. And even he was getting caught with a couple of counters from a guy who's nowhere near his level. So it's a learning fight for him, but he's definitely got a lot of skills. Let me know what you think about all the fights that occurred tonight. Thanks for watching, everybody. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.